Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Ecosystem Experience. Thanks for joining today. Today, I've got a wonderful guest with me, someone who has, well, a very interesting background and pathway into the partnering world and leads one of the world's great tech platforms and partnerships with a company called HubSpot. I'm thrilled to announce that I've got Kelly Sarabyn coming and joining me this morning. Kelly, how are we?
I'm great. Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be on the show.
I have to admit right there and then that intro sounded a little deadpan on my part. I'm a little off this morning. But anyway, Kelly, I am really, really thrilled to have you here. Absolutely thrilled. It's in the midst of trying to read. Anyway, moving on from that sort of thing. Kelly, it is so good to have you here. How's your week been so far this week?
So far so good. It's only Monday, but where I am, it's Monday evening. So it's been a great day. A lot of productive meetings, talking to partners, talking to fellow teams within HubSpot. So I think it's off to a good start so far.
So talking that, tell us quickly, what's your role at HubSpot? You're director of partnership, director of technology partnerships?
Uh, Director of Technology Partnership. So I oversee our technology partner programs and strategy, and also our partner management team for our technology partners.
And what does partnership mean? Like in the description of the words, that sort of thing. What is a technology partner?
And I'm using that word externally because I think in the industry it's the most commonly understood. But what we currently call it at our company is our app partner ecosystem. And that was kind of because HubSpot has an app marketplace is where that name came from. But we have about 1,500 app partners, and they've built integrations to HubSpot. I would say the ones that have the biggest impact in terms of the number of installs, influencing revenue with us, those are typically, mid-market SaaS companies. And we work closely with them, to collaborate on deals, but also to kind of co-service with our shared customers. And then, we have a long tail. Some of those are ones that are built specifically for HubSpot. So we have a number of solutions partners, for example, that will build apps for their customers, and then they realize they can turn it into a product and list it on the app marketplace. We also have some SaaS companies that are amazing and built really for the HubSpot ecosystem specifically. And so that's another kind of persona that exists within the ecosystem and kind of helps to drive value for our customers.
So before we go much deeper and dig into that, I mean, it's a fascinating space and the different layering that partners bring, and even, I mean, I've spent a lot of time myself in that ISV software tech and app type world. And you see the nuances of the types of partners, as you mentioned, from those very small ones right through to the great big global conglomerate sort of partners who are building big things. But Kelly, how did you get into partnerships? Like, what drew you into this space?
Yeah, so it's very interesting. And I always love hearing how people got into partnerships because I feel like you meet people who have come from all different areas of the business. And so I originally got into tech in branding. So I was doing brand storytelling. So really leading a creative team for a lot of B2B SaaS companies. Like, how do you tell your core brand story? So not the visual side, but really, how do you come up with that core messaging that's going to inspire your customer base and really capture what you do in a way that's really compelling and memorable? And from there, I moved over to lead marketing for an early stage company called Pandium, and it's an embedded iPass. So, for those of you who don't know, an embedded iPass is basically a tool, kind of infrastructure that SaaS companies can use to build out product integrations that they can surface to their customers. So, it's different from an iPass like Zapier, where the end user, like a business, will be using it to connect their own systems internally. This is specifically for SaaS companies to build out product integrations, which anyone in partnerships knows there's a common problem. You want to form a tech partnership, there's a great go-to-market story, but your developer is not ready to build the integration, or they're going to build a very simple data sync integration, and you're like, we need something a little stronger. Hence the whole embedded iPaaS category. This can help you to get more integrations out faster and make it a more reasonable lift for your developer team. And so at that company leading marketing, I was selling into tech partnerships, product and engineering. And so I really got very close to technology partnerships. I started, interviewing a lot of the leaders in the space to understand how are you running your tech partner teams? What are your pain points? I was also kind of engaging in partner marketing with other companies in the space. So started getting a little bit into partnerships on that side as well. But I think the main thing was that I was really selling into the persona and got kind of a deep understanding of how partnerships work. I look at it as getting like a mini MBA in
Mm,
partnerships
mm,
without paying the
yeah,
$200,000 because really I was just interviewing so many people in the field, and I also did a lot of content marketing. So we were putting out deep reports, like really studying how people were running these programs and what the field was like. And so that's how I actually connected with my boss at HubSpot, who I had interviewed him for some of the work that I was doing. And then when he had kind of a two ecosystem role open up, connected with him on it and kind of went from there.
yeah, fantastic. I really love like the whole like so much of that resonates with what I've built and seen in ecosystems as well. I mean, starting right, you mentioned right at the very start that storytelling, marketing esque side of things. I find myself sitting here thinking that if I could give one piece of advice to almost any partner person on either sides of the coin, be it you are a vendor or you are a participant in the ecosystem, it's know your story. I really understand your story and how you can tell that value proposition and what it means from and through various lenses. It's going to default to the customer lens, and that is a very important lens. But being able to tell that through different ways, do you find yourself drawing on that storytelling even today in your day-to-day operations with the partners? I mean, you've just been on stage at a bunch of places, and I'm sure you're telling stories there. Do you find yourself just drawing on that all the time?
Absolutely. I think you nailed it. It's multiple audiences and partnerships that you need to be able to tell stories to, right? Because one of the reasons I was drawn to partnerships is how deeply cross functional and complex it is. So, internally, there's usually a bunch of different stakeholders, starting with your C suite, but then across your org product, developer, marketing, sales, CS. You need to have a story for all those functions, and you need to be able to make them understand, like, what is the value in partners? Why should I care? What is that story? And then to your point, I think partnerships being successful, absolutely critical that you nail that JVP, because partnerships extend out the main product on both sides, or services. It could be services, it could be products, but it's kind of a layer on top. And so it's absolutely critical to selling your own product that you have your story dialed. But when you're in a partnership, you have to be the pressure's on even more, right? You have to be more succinct. You have to be more catchy because you're trying to get that direct seller of your partner, of your own team, to remember your story on top of the core story they already have to remember, which is whatever they're selling, right? So,
Exactly.
same thing with
Exactly.
the customer, right? Like if you think about someone buying HubSpot, right? That's like already a huge part of the mental bandwidth in terms of like, what is this platform? What does it do for me? And then to tell a story on top of it of how it can accelerate that even further through a partner, that story has to be even better or it's not going to be successful. So I think it's great that you call that out because I do think in the partnerships field, right? It's something that we should be it's not that's not just for marketing. You can't just leave that to marketing. Like every partner person should have that toolbox of like how do I come up with these compelling joint value prop stories? What does that look like and how do I distribute it to different audiences and how do I change the story depending on who I'm talking to?
It's such an important point. I remember when I was at AWS, and I'm hoping to get this guy on the show, actually have a chat to him. A guy called Danny Rowe was in my team, and he'd come from, like a lot of partner people, came from a very different background into the partnering world. And that's one thing I love about this world. People's journeys and backgrounds into this world are so different. But Danny came from, at one point, from a sales world. And I remember him sitting with me and talking about the partners coming in. He's like, I need to teach them what it is to talk the language of my salespeople, right? And he always used that sort of language about his teams, right? They were, the company's salespeople, but he ran workshops with partners. this is how it is to align your story to the language the sellers are using. This is what makes the sellers think. And those workshops worked really, really well in helping the partners understand who their audience was internally in the vendor in AWS so that they could then have a better conversation together with the customer and really get them on the right path. It's such an important side of things to get that language right in the audience you're going to. One of the questions on that, and you started to touch on it just in that last answer around the C suites, right? The CFO, the CSO, the CRO, the CMO, and all these C people that we've got in the world around us these
There's a
days.
lot of them.
Uh, and the funny is, we keep laddering them up. We've got the CPO, which could be the chief partner person, or it could be the chief product person. Yeah, anyway,
It's confusing.
it's super confusing. We love our acronyms in the tech world. But one of the questions I get over and over and over from people in the partnership world, particularly in the ISV software tech type side of things, I don't see this so much in the sales partnerships or the consulting solution provider type partnerships, is the proving the value of partnerships. You know, the good old, you're a cost center, not a growth lever, not an income source, this sort of thing. How are you currently having that conversation, or how have you had that conversation in the past around proving the value? Because often, as you said, you know, the software ones tend to start as an integration. Oh, it's good for data flow, or it's good for a feature or a function that supports something. But that doesn't always immediately translate to value. How have you wrangled that story?
Yeah, I think it can be a challenging one, and definitely be curious to hear what you've seen work and like what your takes have been on it, because I think that it's something that we struggle with, and to me, I look at it as, where we want to be, right, is convincing that all the way across the customer journey, technology partners can help us meet our own goals as a company, right? And so the reality is most partner leaders are plopped down into a company where there's at best uneven buy-in, and so most of us are in the position of having to kind of try to make the case and make the argument. And I think part of it is how you go about doing it, and also like what are the metrics that you're centering on, right? Because ultimately you're going to need some business metrics to make your case. And so I think sourced and influenced revenue tend to be the more straightforward ones. So sourced tend to be very clear. I think influence revenue, one thing I'll point out is just like the journey that the marketing org has been on, right? There was a time, right, where marketing influence, and even still to this day, it's a little bit in contention. They're constantly trying to figure that out. Should we have a multi-attribution model? Like, how much is the influence of an ebook? What about a field event? So marketing has like fought this battle, right? And it's still ongoing for marketing. But I think technology partners can be in the same thing, because when technology partners influence sales deals, it can look a lot of different ways. Like it can look like, hey, we'll introduce you to a new POC. Hey, this is our current customer. We'll endorse you. Oh, we're going to do joint demos because our solutions are both so complex. They need to be jointly demoed or the prospect's not going to be happy. That would be like a more robust form that I feel like most people would align with. But I would say that's something you have to get buy-in even there. I think you got to define it clearly. You have to make sure you're being tracked within the centralized system, and that you have buy-in on what those definitions are. So I'd say that one. And then I think on the kind of customer value side, it can get tricky, because how do you prove out that value? And that's where it gets a little complex, right? Because one thing I've seen organizations do is they say, well, hey, when our customers are using these integrations, they're retained more. And I think that's often the case, but that can be very challenging to prove definitively, especially if you have, say, a large number of integrations used. So what's the incremental value of one more integration?
Right. Yeah.
Or alternatively, let's say you're kind of a point solution and it's like you're always integrated with the CRM either way. So how do you then make the case for further investment is not just, to your point, a cost center, but actually it's going to drive more revenue, and we're going to be able to acquire more customers, which I think connected to the customer value. When you think about how people buy, right, they're probably often considering integrations in their purchase. but how do you capture that, right? Like, and how do you capture the value of it? Um, that's another one where I've seen companies say, like, hey, if it was mentioned 4 times in the sales process, it must have influenced the deal. But what is the value of that influence can get very tricky to quantify. And I think that's, I honestly don't know that there's an easy answer to those. And I think there's a whole other thing, which is strategic buckets, right? So, like, say you're going into a new geo,
Yeah.
and there's certain technology that is used in that country, and it's like if you don't integrate it, it's a no go. Those can often be easier, and the revenue can be more cleanly attributed that you couldn't enter it. But even there, you look 5 years later, you're a mesh in the market, and then there starts to be questions again as to, like, well, what incremental value is it driving? Because it's just they're always using both. Um, so I do think leaning into data. So the good news, right, is I think AI is giving us more data than we've had before, not only
True,
like
true.
for our customer calls, our emails, like being able to analyze that data at scale and say, hey, this is what our customers and prospects are talking about. Definitely can kind of buttress the case that this is like meaningfully impacting revenue. But I think it's still a challenge. Like, I think it's a not dissimilar challenge that marketing has faced. And you've watched marketing too, especially with this concept. I don't know if you follow, but this idea of like dark social and community, like
Mhm,
more and
mhm.
more recommendations and buyer decision is happening outside of our purview as people turn
Yeah,
towards their peers. And
yeah.
so when marketing teams invest in those type of either building those communities or entering other communities, sometimes they lose visibility, and it's something that businesses have to struggle with of we if we can't capture it, but we have good market data and we have good reason to believe this is influencing it, like how do you approach that? So that was kind of long, but I would love to hear your
Good though.
thoughts because I think this
Yeah.
is this is a perennial challenge for people in tech partnerships.
I think you're absolutely spot on the money there with this being an ongoing challenge. I really like the parallels, and we can learn a lot from our marketing peers in how they have tackled this similar sort of thing over and again. I also really like the data side of things. We were touching earlier about story, 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 and one thing I want to make clear to people is that story isn't doesn't mean just words; it actually means data as well, right? And I think it's a massively important part of the thing is to say you tell your story with data and with evidence. The thing drawing on that I've noticed in teams is, and you touched on it, is this influenced revenue versus realized revenue, that side of things. The influence one, I've seen so many teams spend cycles chasing. I've done it myself. Spend so many cycles chasing down the thought of a number somewhere in there. If I can just get to that churn number, I'll be able to then say, and I know that teams, like even when I was back at MYOB, so much smaller ecosystem side of things, we spent years trying to get to a quantifiable churn number driven by the fact that a customer with one or more app attached, I think we got down to like be able to say a customer with one or more app attached was 60% less likely to churn. And then we could put a number beside it. But as you just touched on, like how accurate is that? Which app is driving that? How is that so important to their business? How has that become critical to their business? And then how does that help grow? And one of the things that I took out of that was the concept of perceived value or perceived influence. I remember standing with some customers early in that journey, and this could have been a PwC type customer. It was a reasonably large accounting practice, and they were talking about buying the software. And then I was brought in to talk about the marketplace and the ecosystem of all these apps that were there. And they said, "Oh, that's really good to know. We're not buying any of those, but we're future proofing. By using your platform, if and when a customer says, I want this, I know it's available." And that side of things was the piece that drove them to actually buy the original product. And so, you look at the cold hard numbers, there was nothing there. There was no sale, there was no additional revenue, there was no nothing. And there's no quantifiable link to the fact that that's what drove it, but that conversation. And it took me on a bit of this journey of the perception of when it's there, I can use the API. When it's available, there's an MCP to me to plug into the AI when I want it, or there's a accounting system or a reporting system or whatever it might be is available, and it's kind of future proofing but that comes down, I think, to the art of telling the value, right? And then realizing that through in all your other areas as to tracking the metrics, the numbers, the engagement, that side of things. So that's something that I sort of found on the way through there.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And then I think to go back to the C-suite that you asked about, right? It's once you have your best data framework that you can come up with that you think is going to be compelling to the person in the C-suite you're talking to, then it is about bringing together the story layer, bringing
Yeah,
together those win
yeah,
stories, like examples that are compelling, right? And like bringing forth that customer that basically shares how important it is to them. And part of it is future proof, right? When you think about integrations, it's usually when you're thinking about scalings and your tech stacks are getting more complex, right? And that's when you start to need those APIs, and that's when you start to need all those a wider set of integrations, and so a growth story too, right? Like not only now but future looking. If our customers are going to continue to grow on us, this is why we need these partnerships to be invested in. So I think that's definitely the other component. And then I think a third way to look at it too is really just getting social proof and validation, which can be through customers, but other leaders in the org, external leaders, industry leaders, market
right.
reports,
Yeah.
consultants. You really got to back the story as part of the exercise of like showing credibility and legitimacy, and that this is like an important function, because in a lot of orgs it's not a given that partnerships is, especially strategic or tech partnerships. But often sometimes, organizations are very direct heavy, and even depending on the industry, even solutions partners and consulting partners, that could be something where someone really has to bring all the data, all the legitimacy, all the stories to kind of get it off the ground and kind of show that vision.
I really love that. I was thinking through that. One of the things that I found frustrating in my career was feeling like you're always on the back foot of having to explain what partnerships are and why they're important. And it doesn't matter, you'll get a new CFO or a new salesperson or someone comes in and they come from a different business and they've been 100% direct. They haven't had partnership, and so you're constant explaining. And I remember being caught off guard with at Atlassian, actually, with the current CFO. And I felt like I had to be so prepared and so ready. And I sat down with him and he just stopped me partway through and he said, Kieran, I'm here on your side. I'm here to be with you. I'm here to support you. This is what my team's job is. And it was like this, it was almost like a sort of warm hug in some sort of ways. We're like, we're partners in this together. I'm here with you. I'll help you tell the story. You just worry about this piece. And I was like, it was so different to find, and I think it's so critical to find your influences outside of your org to really help tell it. And it could be the CFO, it could just be some other salesperson, it could be someone who's unlocked an opportunity, and have them tell your story is so critical across the business.
Agree,
Um,
and I think it's a really good point, because in different orgs it's going to be different people, right? It could be the CMO,
yes,
it could be the chief sales officers. Like you got to find who gets it and then have them help you, because I think to your point, so often people are having to explain it and go back and forth between people who it's like partnerships 101 and then people who have deep experience, and you have to be able to tell both.
exactly. So one of the other areas, just thinking value, thinking where you put your time, your effort, and the space and that sort of things is the distribution of our audiences, right? And I think you had, like I said, 1,600 odd tech partners across the HubSpot. I had 5,500 across Atlassian sort of space. With anything, the good old 80-20 rule comes into play, right? Like, 80% of our revenue comes from 20% of the partners, which probably is like 10 partners or something ridiculous, right? How do you get traction beyond that top tier? How do you continue to show the value of the long tail?
Yeah, I think it's a really good point, because I think some companies miss by not even aggregating the long tail, and once you get to a certain size, right, even if any individual partner is not driving a ton of value on its own in terms of scale, when you aggregate them, it can definitely add up. So I feel like there's making the investments. I think getting clarity on what the long tail is doing and who they're serving, and kind of having a strategy for what that could look like. And then I think you do have to internally tell that story, and showcase those different customers. A lot of times, for example, what you'll see is the long tail is servicing people in different industries. So maybe not core industries for your company, but ones that you do have presence in. And so they're meeting kind of like niche bespoke needs. And I think those are really good stories that you can pull out and kind of show those success stories. And I think those success stories can work two ways, which is internally showcasing the value of that long tail to other people within the business, but also to other long tail partners, right? Like showcasing how they've grown their business and could be successful can also kind of create that flywheel where you're attracting more partners and then you have more stories to tell and then you're growing together with them. But I think to me, I'm super excited about the long tail. Like, I think there's so much room for innovation and like a better partner experience than most companies. I feel like kind of drop the ball on the long tails. Like, they don't really have good enablement programs, ops, marketing in place that could actually drive more value. Because I do think it's kind of the default view that hey, it's just the top partners that drive the most value. So let's just double down and focus on them, and that's what's working. Um, but
So,
curious
so
what's
with
your thoughts? Because you guys had a very scaled ecosystem at Atlassian.
Well, and even at AWS, like we had dedicated programs on rising stars, and again, this is where data is so critical, right? And as a leader, you should be in and across your data, you should have dashboards, and not just tracking that some big person just cracked the next $1 million or $100 million sales sort of things, which we all celebrate and are wonderful, but actually the next person who's far further down, who's landed just that next sale or the next three sales or three sales in the same industry. And you're like, oh, hang on a second, what's happening there? And it might be small, it might be nascent, but you watch that over a period of time. 6 months from now, they've suddenly become a dominant name in that particular industry. As you said, it might be a small industry, but then when you're talking to your salesperson and they mention something about an industry play, all of a sudden you've got a new go-to-market opportunity for a new player that you can put some focus in. And the thing I often liked about the rising stars or the sort of next generation coming up is that hunger they have. They are much more willing to work around programs, and I'll touch on this in a second with you. Is they don't always have all the ducks in a row. They don't have all the bits and pieces, but there is a hunger there. There's a desire to build and do and create. And when you get the right partner with that hunger and a market fit, you can accelerate them and watch growth happen in incredible ways, much more so than you can at the top end of town. So I always quite enjoyed having team members focusing on rising stars and what they're doing and what's next, because there's innovation coming there. But on that, one thing I find in there sometimes is that hunger and that passion trips them up to becoming very good talk versus delivery and execution. So I want to ask you, what separates a partner from having good talk to a partner who actually delivers and has the right things in place?
Interesting. Yeah, I think that I think what is key is understanding the goals of the platform in this case, and not just your own business, right? So that's one problem I have seen with partners who are, maybe to your point, be incredibly eager, but they're only looking at it through their lens and potentially in a short-sighted way where they're not thinking about the audiences that they're interacting with. But the other thing is, I do think the point that you made about looking at the data and this concept of like rising stars and making sure that your team is kind of equipped to understand who's the talkers and who's the doers, and having like some kind of a paradigm for that, whatever your goals are, however you define that, because that's another problem that you see when you don't have those kind of frameworks in place. Then the squeaky wheel gets the grease is the old phrase. Like, you see that in partnerships a lot, is that there's
Oh
like a
yeah.
void and a
Yep.
squeaky wheel will fill the void. And
Yep.
and it's ultimately not a win for anyone, because it's like not a win-win, to your point, and ultimately that will fizzle on both sides. But I do think some of the best ways to counteract that is, even for the long tail, is having some data-driven indicators that enables you to measure value and determine who actually is rising by those measures, right? And those are the partners that we want to invest in, not the ones that are just making themselves known to a bunch of different people within the organization, which I think will always happen.
Yeah, they will always have it. I laugh because my mind goes to someone that I will not mention, who is phenomenally good at that networking side of things, right? And social media photos and LinkedIn posts and emails, with all these incredible top level people in the. I'm like, how on earth did you get to that person or this thing or this thing? And I'm inside the company. I can't even do it myself. Um, but when you couple that networking ability with then the hunger, the passion, and the execution. Holy crap, that is literally a rocket ship. And watching that work is phenomenal. And that's a person who just knows their audience, knows their customer need, and it's just tenacious and goes and gets it. It's annoying when they go around you and then you're left with a bit of egg on the face, but that's powerful, of course. Okay, so we've spent quite a bit of time talking about partnerships and that side of things. Now, I know right now, because we were talking just off camera, that you are actively recruiting right now. So if you're looking for people in the partner world, what does it take to make a good partner person on the other side of the equation rather than just the partner conversation?
Yeah, and I think there's some variety depending on what role you have within partnerships. But I think some of the things that we've been talking about, right? I do think, like those partners you're referring to, being persistent, tenacious in a professional way is kind of key because of a lot of the challenges we've been discussing. Right? It's deeply cross functional. You're also dealing with external organizations and external people. So I think being able to tell a good story, being very persistent, understanding data as well, and being data driven is important. Um, I think for a lot of roles, having strong relationship skills, like especially partner management, right? You want to see that. I think even in more internal program facing roles, you still need the ability to manage relationships and engage in kind of stakeholder management. I think that's important in partnerships in general. So I would say for me, those are kind of some universals that I think people excel in partnerships. I guess another big one is thriving in ambiguity, right? So I think that it's so complex. There's so many changes now more than ever, but if you're going to have to be comfortable pivoting, the company strategy changes, you have to move the org, your partner's strategy changed and you have to accommodate that, right? So being comfortable with that is key. I think if you're not, if you're going to be very stressed very soon in a partner role.
Totally agree. Totally agree. The two that come up for me all the time as I think about it is curiosity and empathy. You know, I think you have to have a curiosity to go and sit and explore with partners. Well, what does this mean, and how does this go there? And just constantly ask that question. The next question, that why and how and when, and that sort of just curiosity. I think the empathy side of things for me is about then being able to apply it to and to sort of be able to. We talked about storytelling. You can tell a really good story if you can walk in the shoes, or at least you can create empathy and feeling as to why that's important. So when you're saying that this product unlocks this or resolves this for a customer, are you articulating the pain that customer felt and what it really meant for them on a day-to-day basis? And is that a financial thing, or is that a process thing, or is that just a life improvement sort of thing? And so for me, looking through all those things, your tenacity and data and everything else, but curiosity and empathy were very high in what I was looking for in people. And I think the other one, just coming to it, is that you touched on it there, is as partner people, we wear multiple hats, right? When we're out talking to the partner, we are representative of the brand that we are there, and we are telling the company line because we have to tell the company line. And then when we're in internal meetings, we're now talking for the partners. We are fighting for the partners, and we're fighting against the company sort of thing. And if there's bad news to share, it's bad news on both sides. If there's good news to share, there's good. And so there's that thick skin needed, and that sort of tenacity to push through, or be able to wear those multiple hats. I think is something that's a skill that is needed in this space as well, right? And resilience that's needed in the space as well.
Yeah, I agree. So we're all looking for unicorns.
Exactly. The number of times I said that to a recruiting manager. Yes, I'm looking for a unicorn.
Yeah.
Kelly, this has been a fantastic conversation. I'm sure we could carry on, but I know we both have real jobs and well, you have a real job to go to. Me, not so much right now. This is my real job right now. If there was, what's the, just as a person right now living in the world around you, what is one tool? And actually, you know what? I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, from now on, people who answer this question can no longer say ChatGPT. What is, because everyone's going, oh, ChatGPT. What is one tool that you can't live without?
Currently, I would have to say Slack.
Oh, okay.
I do a ton of collaboration in Slack for my job, connected to a ton of partners. We're both in partnership leaders. In fact, I think that's where you and I directly
Correct.
connected, was in the
Yes,
partnership leader Slack.
it was.
Um, so I have it on my phone, which is probably not healthy.
So
Don't
is it probably?
recommend that at home, kids.
No.
But nevertheless, I do have it on my phone and my computer. So I find it to be very useful tool for collaboration. So since you prevented me from mentioning deep research, who I do also love,
Yes, yes,
I
yes.
will say, that that is in the day to day of my my work life, very much so.
I must admit, and in all seriousness, it is surprising how fast ChatGPT, particularly deep research, that side of things, and in our world where you're saying, tell me about this partner or this new person I'm meeting, or just help me look 360 degrees around the corner or see something different, phenomenally powerful in our day to day, right?
I know. I'm very impressed with like the quality of like a deep research report. To your point, any new company, potential partner, you want to deep dive on their business, their leadership, it can get that to you very, very quickly, which is pretty remarkable given what it would take to have done, 6 to 12 months ago.
I mean, yeah, we would have hired people to spend a lot of time in that sort of space, or you have an intern or someone junior on the team and you expect them to do it. Whereas today, I'm like, no, anybody can go and build that basic business knowledge. And then what are you taking on top of it, right? What are you layering in as the expert on top?
I'll give a good example too for like partner people and what I did, because I actually did run this like a year and a half or 2 years ago myself. I manually went out and looked at our top two tiers of solutions partners, and I looked up all of their to see if they had any app partners on their website and any app partner program. And I marked this on a spreadsheet. As you can imagine, it took a fair amount of time.
Mm,
This
yeah.
year, I just asked deep research to do it, and for like 600 solutions partners, and it created a whole table for me, and it said, here's how they describe it, here's what it looks like, here's some examples of the partners. Of course, these aren't perfect, we all know that,
No,
right? You do
no.
want to verify. It's definitely been a huge time saver in my job. So
Yeah. Oh, massive time saver. Even in here, I'm getting it to help me with, understanding people and their backgrounds and bits and pieces and pull stuff through. That's saving me amount of time so we can spend time having good
did you
conversations.
do a deep research on me here?
Um, well, it's been lovely talking to you.
You're like, I left that part out of the interview. I'm not gonna pry.
Is this the modern LinkedIn stalk? I did a deep research on this person.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I'm married, but if you're out there dating, it might not be a bad idea.
I wasn't expecting
Be
us to go to
safe.
excellent. Kelly, it's been absolutely fantastic having a conversation with you, learning a bit more about partnerships and how you built them, how you scale them, how you tell the story. Thank you so very much for spending some time with me today.
Thank you for having me.
Excellent. Well, folks, that brings us to the end of this episode. Remember to like, share, subscribe, all that good social media stuff. Thank you very much, and we'll see you on the next one. Cheers.